Welcome back. Now, for the first time this year, the country will experience two consecutive fuel price cuts. The Central Energy Fund projects significant fuel price decreases in July, particularly on the petrol front. Much needed relief for consumers and businesses alike. Spokesperson for the Automobile Association, Layton Beard, joins us for greater perspective on this. Thank you so much for your time, Layton. Now, how much relief can consumers expect in July, especially after that drop that we saw in June?
Yeah, I think we're looking at around R1 a litre for petrol for both grades. It might be a couple of cents either way, around 55 cents for diesel again, looking at variances of a couple of cents here and there, and then around 35 to 40 cents for illuminating paraffin. So good decreases for petrol, quite significant. I mean, a rand decrease in that is always going to be welcome. And when you look at the relief that we got in June, if this outlook that we are saying materializes in July, we'll be back around 23 Rand, 25 cents a litre for petrol, which is where we were kind of in February, December. So really good news, I think, for motorists, for people who own vehicles.
Yeah, I mean, obviously 2 consecutive months of decreases, but how significant is it considering what we have experienced, say, for the past 6 months?
Look, I think any decrease is significant for motorists. When people are budgeting a specific amount of money based on very high numbers for fuel, they absolutely feel it. When you're spending, anywhere between 2,000 and 3,000 Rand a month on your fuel bill, if you can spend, maybe 150 or 300 Rand less on that, it is a saving. So I think it is significant. The big thing for us in these numbers, though, is the fact that diesel isn't increasing again. And we know that diesel is such a massive input cost in so many different sectors. When that fuel price goes up, we invariably see quite immediate increases at the tolls. And if those prices don't, if they're not affected by fuel price increases, then at least one part of the input equation is dealt with a little more effectively, which I think is very good news for consumers in general, not only for motorists. But, any decrease is welcome and any decrease is significant. I think in an economy such as this, where wages and salaries are not necessarily keeping pace with inflation, people will welcome anything that gives them any kind of relief.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously, I know that the oil price, the international Brent crude price, is a big factor in determining the fuel price. But, just looking, obviously, you mentioned the rand also being a contributor as well. How much of an impact do you expect that to be, at least in the short term, considering the strength that we have seen on the rand for the past, let's say, month or so?
Yeah. I mean, when you look at the numbers from the Central Energy Fund, and these are unaudited numbers, the impact of the value of the rand against the dollar is playing a very insignificant role. Okay. If you're looking at a decrease of around R1 a litre, movement in the oil prices, in the international product prices, is playing a 99% role in that decrease, whereas the value of the rand, the average value of the rand against the US dollar is going to contribute maybe 2 or 3 cents to that decrease. So very limited. Obviously, the rand strength has an impact on local fuel prices. In this instance, though, it's not contributing substantially. It's playing a very minor role.
All right. And just, I mean, you did mention, obviously, the diesel price also going down. We did see in May fuel in the inflation picture, transport was one of the big contributors. There was an uptick there. But just looking at the fuel price decreases that we have seen in June, July, can we then expect the inflation picture for June, July to kind of be softer than we did see in May?
Yeah, I think that's a very difficult question to answer. I mean, it could be. We know that fuel plays a very big part in many companies' operations, a very big part in their operations. And especially when you see the number of trucks on our roads, we just become very aware of how reliant we are again on road freight in South Africa. And that reliance obviously comes with a cost, and that cost is in the fuel cost. So I think when businesses look at the fact that they may be paying a little less for diesel over a period of time, over a month or even a 2-month period, they will certainly welcome that. And that may add a little bit, into their pricing. I think the problem that we've got is that when we see an increase, and in many cases a sharp increase, the impact is really felt immediately. And, producers and manufacturers and retailers are going to want to accommodate for that almost immediately because it is such a big input cost for them. When the price comes down, I think many of those same players are going to wait and hedge their bets in terms of, is this going to be sustainable? Are we going to see these decreases kept for another month or two, or maybe even 3 months? So I'm not exactly sure how this is going to play into that inflation number, bearing in mind that inflation is dependent on many other factors as well. It may play a small role in that, but again, I think, you know, all of those sectors I mentioned, agriculture, retail, manufacturing, transport, I think they'll wait a little bit before it filters right through into their pricing, maybe see if there's more relief on the horizon before they make any big moves downward.
Well, Layton, there are obviously still negotiations going on in terms of the cabinet composition there under the Government of National Unity. But what would the AA like to see from the GNU, particularly looking at a sustainable fuel price structure?
I think one of the things that we would like to see is a very open and transparent process where the DMRE involves many different role players, civil society, people within the petroleum industry, academics, people who are closely aligned with the fuel price in the country and involved in that sector, to review the current fuel pricing mechanism and the structure of the fuel price, with a goal to determine whether all of the elements on that fuel price, A, are necessary, B, whether they're calculated correctly, and C, whether any of those elements can be adjusted in a way that makes it more sustainable going forward in terms of buffering against rising fuel costs. Now, many people look at this and say, well, there's a simple solution. Let's simply take the big taxes off that fuel price. Our view is a little different. Our view is that if you were to simply scrap those taxes, government will look for another way to collect the taxes, especially the general fuel levy, which is the fourth biggest tax that government collects. It generates around 95 billion rand to the fiscus annually. And government won't simply want to get rid of that income. They would like to see that still maintained, and it's a very easy tax for them to collect. So I think there are a number of discussions that should be held around the issue of the fuel pricing structure and whether any of those elements can be adjusted to mitigate against costs. If that review comes back and says, well, we've done that exercise and there is nothing that we can do to protect ourselves against international movements, therefore we are at the mercy of those geopolitical developments that happen internationally, then at least I think South Africans will have a sense of security knowing that that exercise was done. Everybody was involved in it. It was an open process, and the result was that we are where we are, and we can't really move further than that.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time and giving us insights on that, Layton. That was the Automobile Association's Layton Beard.